Howdy, my name's Jace. I grow tropical plants. I'm up here at a plant shop that I work at called Grow Plant Shop here in Fort Worth. I want to do a video today real quick explaining how I like to grow my aroids, particularly Monstera at the moment that I'll be showing you, but it works for philodendron, epiprimnum, anything that likes to climb a tree in nature. I like to grow my aroids to maturity. I like to get them big so that you can see how the leaves change throughout their life cycle. The Monstera I wanted to show y'all today, I have a couple here that I'm growing on moss poles. So I have a Monstera. This one is called the Indonesian mint variety. It's variegated, but they can be kind of hard to see, and the leaves are a little bit wonkier than, they can kind of be hard to see. The leaves are a little bit wonkier than traditional Monstera adansonii. The variegation seems to play a big part in the leaf shape. Like even this one, you can kind of see the variegation running along this ridge, and that just kind of takes away any of the extra leaf behind it. But they're a really pretty plant. The mint will kind of just come in splotches. I think the leaf shape is unique. I think it's a lot of fun. And they are still sizing up relatively well. The ones that when I received it, they're a little bit smaller. They seem to be fading into a little bit more of a green variegation rather than that stark mintiness. Really interesting plant nonetheless. So I have this guy growing on a moss pole, as well as a Monstera adansonii aria variegated. This one's a little bit more of a picky Monstera adansonii. The variegation is easy to brown. It'll do it almost randomly, for me at least. Very pretty plant, sizing up really well. You can kind of see I got this from a 2-leaf top cutting, grew it in perlite until I could put it on this pole, and it's been doing really well. I brought these up because I need to extend them. You can kind of tell that the top leaves are coming off the pole. That's not ideal for when we're growing these, wanting to get them to maturity. It'll still work, and the aerial roots are still here and they haven't dried out, which will sometimes happen whenever we wait too long. The aerial roots will kind of dry out and they're not as viable. Monstera have a little bit of wiggle room though, because they can root from top to bottom on even the stem. They tend to be vigorous climbers, so they make it a little bit easier on us. But nonetheless, I needed to go ahead and extend these poles. So I brought these up and I'll kind of talk y'all through how and why I do that. Let me grab a pole to extend this with. I have an extra pole that I've already preloaded with moss. And I'm using Rousseau plant care poles. I really enjoy them. They have these slits at the back, so there's still plenty of airflow throughout the pole, and it's open front, so you can open these tabs and you can press your plant into them and then close over if the stem's still relatively small. And that helps, really helps whenever you're starting things on a moss pole to get it to initially attach. That's usually the hardest part of moss pole maintenance, is to get them to initially attach. That's what will usually upset people or kind of make the plant care side of moss poles kind of off-putting to some people. But Rousseau does a really good job of making these easy to attach and to grow to start. So all I do is, he created these new poles that there's a tab on each one that you can align and kind of flip out, and I'll put a zip tie or tie it later on. But even then you don't have to. I could hold it right here and shake it and it's already firm. So I like to attach, and then I'll just push this moss down into where it will be ready to just kind of connect with the other one. From here, I'll take this Monstera Adansonii. Take this Monstera Adansonii. I'll open up one of these tabs, or even a few of them, because you can see that this guy is not attached and it's kind of going off to the side. We want to realign it to where it will just continue to climb and it won't even notice that it wasn't attached for a little bit. So I'll go underneath this tab, I'll go into the next tab, arranging it to where the stem is making contact to the moss, and I will just connect it back. I've definitely accidentally chopped leaves off before doing this, so do it with a bit of caution. I'm not the most cautious. Probably should be, but it has not stopped me yet. But yeah, these moss poles work wonders. You can kind of, but I'll do a little, you can kind of see roots right here. So these roots will attach into this pole and it just becomes an extension of the pot that it's in. So really you could keep this in a 6-inch pot for a very long time, forever even. They don't mind getting root bound. Like I have some roots coming out the bottom. I could size it up, but I don't really need to or want to, because the goal is I'll grow this up, this pole, and then I'll chop it. And since it already has roots in the moss pole, once I chop, I can just pot it back into an airy substrate and it will root from that moss into the bottom out of the pot. And there's not really too much shock going on. That's what's great about this. It's kind of like skipping a step in propagation, rather than like how you would usually cut at an aerial root, put in water or put in perlite, let it root out, and then plant it. This one, you're not really even like, you're just kind of skipping those intermediate steps. The plant will take a little bit of shock, and it will only show it by producing a slightly smaller leaf with the next leaf, and then it will usually get back to growing bigger, incrementally as it continues up the pole. I really enjoy using moss poles. It makes my life a little bit easier, especially for the goal of getting them to size up as I continue growing. So that was a Monstera Indonesian mint. I also have this Monstera. I also have this Monstera Adansonii, the Aria variegated, and this one is showing a lot of sizing up. Like, I have large hands. You'll just have to trust me. But I have large hands, and this is sizing up beautifully, especially considering like these older leaves being quite a bit smaller. But so I'm going to extend this guy as well. I have another preloaded pole to extension, so I'll grab that real quick. So I just have another prepared sphagnum moss pole. You don't have to use sphagnum moss if you don't like to use sphagnum moss. I used it just because that's how I started. Like, I used to do DIY moss poles. Those were a little bit more of a pain. That's why I have switched to solely using these Rousseau poles. These are a lot easier. You can buy them it already comes with the slits and everything, and they're easy to stack. I used to do chicken wire and make my own, kind of how like Sydney Plant Guy does his. But this is just a little bit more ease, and a little bit, it's still hands-on, but not as hands-on as making your own pole. And I'm just pushing the sphagnum to reconnect with that other sphagnum pole. But you can use cocoa husks, cocoa peat. Some people use aroid mix. I just enjoy sphagnum. Not to say that others work better or worse. Sphagnum seems to work just fine for me, so I've just been sticking with that. Sphagnum dries out quick, but it's manageable for me. And what I'll do, Rousseau recently came out with a slow, similar to like how you would do pon. he has a like slow release attachment here at the top that will tell you whenever it's empty. It has a little dial that will poke up how some of those pond floats. When the reservoir is full, it'll be upright, and as it goes down, that little dial will sync with it. I think I'll get those one of these days. Right now, I just use a water bottle that I cut in half, and I'll poke little holes in the bottom. And I'll set it up here, and then it's just like a small little shower for it, and it will slow release as long as the holes make contact with the sphagnum. I've been having a little bit of issues recently with the fertilizer I use. I use like a kelp extract fertilizer as well as another fertilizer, and the kelp extract has a little bit of like, I guess, non-solubles even when I shake it, and those will get stuck in the holes, and I'll have to re-poke, and that can be annoying. But this does a good job of getting these to root in. I couldn't recommend the Rousseau poles enough. And this guy's rooted in as well. Gosh, I hope that shows. With the algae, that's what all this green is, algae buildup, which I have not had any issues with, like that harming anything. It's just because these are clear. Algae will grow with the moisture on the sphagnum moss. Maybe the roots will show. You can definitely see it a little bit right here. Yeah, right here. Rousseau poles are not the only way to grow things to maturity, or like moss poles are not the only way to grow things to maturity. You can also air layer. I'll show an example of that here in a minute, as well as if it's a Monstera deliciosa that you want to climb up, just having it on some sort of support. If you want it to climb, having it on some sort of support, whether it be bamboo or the cocoa husk, like the cocoa coir poles, those will be there just for support so that the plant knows that there's something behind it. And as it produces its aerial roots, you can just guide those back into the soil, and that's what those roots are for. Those are the aerial roots that they're sending down as runners to find either moisture or something to grow into, and that will expound on its maturity by a lot. And it happens quickly, especially with the deliciosa. They grow like a weed. I have another one that I'm going to show how I would air layer, or what the aerial roots will even look like if you have not seen aerial roots on Monstera. So this is a Monstera borzigiana albo variegata, or just an albo Monstera. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to air layer it. So that implies finding one of these aerial roots. You can see this guy right here just being produced. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a pocket of soil that I'm going to surround this root so that this root can actually continue to grow as if it was already in a new pot. And without cutting it before propagating, you can just continue to grow it, and that will trick it into thinking that it's in nature, doing its own thing, climbing up a tree how it usually like. This is a great method for if you're wanting to propagate. You can do it with every single node. You can put a thing of soil around every single node so that as it continues to grow, you'll have basically a root system already ready for a 4-inch nursery pot. And that's what I've done several times with this specific. This is one of my mother plants for my albo. So I'm going to air layer this guy so that I can cut it again. I've been a little bit lazy by not air layering it so far, but I'm going to show you how I would air layer it. All you'll need is tape. I don't use any special tape, just regular old Scotch tape, saran wrap, and it doesn't even have to be saran wrap. I've used Ziploc baggies before too. The main thing is you just want something that you can water from the top and keep soil completely around these aerial roots. So tape, saran wrap, scissors come in handy, but that's it. I'll also throw a bamboo stake just because this will get taller as it grows. And the sooner I put a bamboo stake, the better, I guess. And I'll just attach the air layer to the bamboo stake. But yeah, I'll show you how that works. So I've already put bamboo stake into the pot. We have the bamboo there so that as we put more air layers on, it can get top heavy, and so the stake will just kind of keep it going in one direction without any fear of it just toppling over as easy. I have some tape pre-cut, and it's nice to have at the ready, just because as we continue going, your hands will get pretty full, and it's nice to already have it without having to scramble for it later. I have soil mix. It's a little bit slightly more dense than the soil that the main pot is, but these air layerings dry out a lot faster, or they dry out a little bit faster than the pot in the main pot, just because it's a little bit less soil and there's a little bit more like air hitting it from top and bottom. So it'll dry out just a little bit faster, and it's going to be less soil than what's here. And we're just trying to aim for a time where they dry out around the same time, if that makes sense. Just so as we water the main pot, we can also water the air layering, and then it doesn't have to be on two different watering schedules. Air layering, though, is very forgiving. I've had things that look like it might have dry rotted a little bit on my air layer, and even after cutting, it takes to soil really well still. I guess it can depend on what genus you're doing. Monstera are very forgiving from air layering. I've had more success with air layer propagation than just cutting a Monstera, putting it in water. Well, at least in Albo, I've had more success with air layer than putting it in water. They're a little bit easier to rot in water, in my opinion. So I'll just stick with the safest bet, which to me is air layering. And I've propagated Monstera albo upwards of 50 times, I think, by now, or at least gotten at least 50 plants from them. Let's say around 25 to 30 times. Nonetheless, several times. And I've had success with air layer propagations. I don't know if I've rotted one from air layering. I've definitely rotted one from cutting and putting in water. But to me, this is safer. So we got this pocket of soil, gonna slide it off and then just kind of palm it. And you're eyeballing to see if you'll think this will be enough soil. Personally, what I'm gonna do, since this root down here at the bottom, this is usually one that I'd try and air layer, but it's already rooted and going into the main pot, and it's in there. Like, there's probably a root system underneath the soil, and it'll be good to go. So I'm just gonna let that one be, and we can always cut here at the base and tease this one out later and create its own pot. What I'm gonna be focusing on is these two. And since they're so close, I think I'm just gonna air layer them both in one air layer pocket, keep it simple. So what I'm gonna do, you wanna get in between the bamboo and the plant, just because you don't want to tape to the bamboo, or you don't want the air layer to be around the bamboo. You want as little chance for bamboo to rot as possible. You'll just create this little pocket. You'll wrap around, connect the saran wrap, get some tape that you already have prepared, make that initial bam, bop. Cool. And what I like to do, just poke down around it, get some soil into spots that it can kind of reach down into. I'm going to make another connection, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to just top fill this top saran wrap with a little bit extra soil, make it a little bit taller. Push it down. And you're going to lose a little bit of soil to that initial watering. It's just going to go down through the bottom. But that's okay. You can always top up again afterwards. tape it. I like to tape any larger holes that I see, like this guy. I'm gonna connect to right here. Tape it. It doesn't have to be pretty. That's the special thing about air layering. Generally, you're not doing it for aesthetics. This is for the sole purpose of either getting your plant to maturity a little bit faster, as well as propagation. So what I like to do, bam, air layered, and I will then just tape it several times to the actual bamboo. Just to keep it snug. Cool. And again, not the prettiest, but you'll be able to see the roots coming in, and whenever you do go to cut, you'll be able to just snap right here, and you'll have two plants that can go straight into 4-inch pots. And it tends to be a pretty high success rate. I'll show you a couple of plants that we have air layered here in the shop. I'm gonna grab a couple of plants that we've air layered prior. The pots that they're in are straight from the air layer into these new pots, and this is how they've grown since being chopped. There was no propagation method other than air layering. So this is Philodendron glorious. This was the leaf that was on the initial plant before chopping, and this is the growth after the chop, and that is the first growth since cutting. This one was a node that had lost its top leaf. Those tend to be a little bit smaller to start, just because I assume this leaf will help that initial node to photosynthesize and grow a little bit stronger. But there was no leaf left. It was just a node that had been rooted with the air layering, put it into a 4-inch pot, which was around the same size as the root system that it had in that air layer, and this is the growth. So a little bit of a difference, but just as easy, and they tend to all grow at the same pace. We have several of these cuttings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, and then the top cut we still have. So the top cut we still have, and it took it like there was not even a problem, that nothing even happened really. So this was the top cut of that Philodendron glorious. Slightly smaller leaf, but this one's still expanding a little bit, and it, you can kind of tell, did not care. So roots coming out the bottom, roots around the side, all from air layering, no propagation in between other than air layering. So it's a great way to multiply your plants without really any fear of propagation. I find whenever you cut and prop, it stops, the growth cycle stops. There's nothing that will continue it. It's hard to keep it going like it was before, even with top cuts, mid cuts. Nothing will really keep it going once it's in water or perlite. Even if fertilizing, it will usually take like a hit pretty strong to growth. But with air layering, we found minimal of it slowing down. And depending on the plant, you really don't even lose like those old leaves. Philodendron glorious took it like a champ though. But yeah, just wanted to hop on and show y'all a couple tactics that I like to use to get my plants to maturity, as well as if I want to propagate with minimal shock. I like to utilize air layering, and then for my home, for like aesthetics, I like to use the moss pole a little bit more. But yeah, these are great options for me. They might not be great options for you. I just wanted to show you how I like to do them, because care can kind of change depending on person to person, house to house. But if you have any questions, feel free to comment. I'm always happy to help out. Thanks for following. Appreciate y'all. See y'all soon.